Hi there. Welcome back to Tuesday's Tips. I'm Greg Kaiser, and we've been looking at doing some local edits in Lightroom. And while we talk about Lightroom in specific, most of what I'm saying is going to apply to other image editors. So if you don't use Lightroom, stick around with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already. Hopefully this is going to be beneficial to everybody out there that's doing any kind of editing to their digital photography. This week we are looking specifically at the background mask, and we've kind of covered this one already when we're dealing with the subject mask. I showed you how to select the subject and then invert it, which is anything that isn't the subject, and that essentially is what the background mask is. In that light, I don't use the background mask all that often. For what I do, primarily my landscape and decay photography, I find that it's not overly useful. More often than not, I am selecting a subject if I'm using a quick mask like that. So there's really not a need to do select background and then invert it. So I don't use background often. However, when I am doing portraiture and taking pictures of people, I do find it very useful as a one-click solution. I could go in, select the person, and then invert it, and that would by default give me the background, but that's just a couple extra clicks. So having the ability to select the background right off is rather beneficial when dealing with people photography. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and go into Lightroom, and I've got a couple of photos picked out here, and I'm going to link to the model that's used in these down in the description. Her name is Michelle. She goes by Mi Jalapeno on Instagram. Really professional model. I highly recommend working with her if you are in need of hiring a model. She is central to North Carolina, based out of Charlotte, but she does travel. Again, I will link to her information down in the description. But I want to go ahead and get into this. Now, obviously, I'm going to go on a pretty much edited photo just for simplicity. I'm going to show you a couple things that we can do with this background mask. We're not going to get too in depth with how to edit, but I'm going to show you what are some things that can be done. To start with, we've got obviously Michelle here, who is the model, who is the subject, but the background is kind of busy as far as everything that's not Michelle. So what is Lightroom going to do when it comes time to pick a background? Well, let's see. We're going to go create a new mask, and we are going to select the background. And let's see what happens. And Lightroom's going to go through its thing, it's going to detect, and there we go. It does a pretty good job, honestly, with all the different things going on here. But just in case you're not able to see, it's missed a couple of kind of important things that would need to be on the list of not Michelle. Kind of like the edge of the couch here, this little spray of fabric, and a little bit of the flowers. And if you're having a hard time seeing that, let's go over to white on black, and you see where we don't have really good definition. So that is one of the weaknesses when you do have kind of a busy background, and I wanted to make that kind of apparent here. Now, as we've talked before, you can go in and we can add a brush. And remember, I've got two brushes. My A brush is a 30% brush that I build up. B brush is 100%. So we're going to take auto mask off here, make the brush a little bit bigger, and we're just going to add what the background mask kind of forgot. And we don't have to be exact here, and I'm not going to go in and make a real precise mask by any stretch. I just want to show you kind of what the difference here would be. A little bit down here at the bottom, little here on the couch. So now let's go over here to white on black, and you see it's gotten a whole lot better, and we can even go in and clean up some of these areas here, which is one of the nice benefits to using the white on black masking overlay. We uncheck that, and there we go. So now we've got the background selected, and of course we can do whatever we want. And one thing that I haven't really gotten into is what is available with these masks. Let's uncheck that so we have the picture. Everything that you see over here on the side, which looks an awful lot like the basic global panel, is available with local edits. We've got all the stuff here that we can do. We can drop the shadows a little bit if we want to give it a little bit more drama. Even drop the blacks. Kind of crush those darks and shadows if that's the look that we're wanting to go for. We can change the temperature of the background. And I was going for a very analogous color palette here, so all the colors kind of blend this way for a reason. If you wanted to, you could drop the saturation. See, that kind of loses the color for me. You can boost the saturation. All of these things are available. Point color. We can go in and pick a specific color, like the beige on this couch. And we can change how bright the couch is by changing that luminosity. You can see there just kind of how we're doing this. And it's a really neat feature. And this is a newer part of Lightroom where we've gotten the ability to do the point color, and I really, really like being able to have that ability. Speaking of color, we've got the tone curve also. We can add a little bit of an S-curve to these masks. In this situation, the background. We can go in and we can play with the different color channels. Let's see. Say I want to pull a little bit of the blue out, which essentially is going to warm the background. And we're going to do a little bit more with this on the next picture that I've got, and I think you'll kind of appreciate what I'm going to say there. A lot of times with background, you can reduce the texture a little bit, just soften it. It's not like defocusing, it's not like the Gaussian blur or anything like that. It's just a way of taking care of some of that fine contrast. Drop the texture a little bit, because texture does bring the eyes to that point. So if the background has a lot of textures going on, you can reduce that. We can change the sharpness, we can reduce the noise. Moire and defringe don't do a whole lot down here usually on this particular mask. That's something that I usually will do on brush or potentially on a subject. But you kind of get the idea here. You can do all of these things on this stack. And the point color and the tone curve are more recent additions in Lightroom, and those are really game changers for me. Another thing that we can kind of point out here, and let's just go ahead and brighten this, make it a little bit, there we go, a little bit easier for you to see on the other end of this video. Now obviously I've gone overboard, and I might want to drop the amount down. So this slider up here at the top, it reduces the effect. So I can drop it down from 100, and basically it's like the opacity slider in Photoshop. So I can drop it down about halfway, and that looks a lot better. Now, if I wanted more from that 100% mark, I can dial in more. And this is extremely effective when you have multiple sliders that have been affected. We've adjusted the exposure, the shadows, the blacks. We've done point color. We've gone into the blue channel, added a curve. All of these things, and dropped the clarity. All of these things make for a more difficult mask. And that is where, instead of going in and trying to keep that same recipe and adjusting everything in unison to get this effect, we can perfect how it is applied through this amount slider. And it is extremely, extremely helpful to be able to do that. So when you get done with the masks, go over here and go back to the sliders. And I want to bring up the next picture. This one's going to be a little bit easier to visualize. So obviously we've got a much simpler, I can get this out of the way. Come on. That computer's not wanting to get along with me today, doing a lot of different things. But anyway, this is a much simpler picture. We obviously have subject, we have background. I do like minimal type work. This fits. To that, there's not a lot going on, but that also makes it very easy to see what we can do with background. So select background. It's going to think for a second, and there's really not a whole lot going on here. So here we go with the white on black overlay, and you can see it has done a really good job of selecting. There's a little bit here with the hair, and honestly, you have to make a judgment call. Is what you're going to be doing with the background going to affect little details like this? And if they are, then you need to adjust. So we've got the background selected, and what I want to do is let's go ahead and just start adjusting just a little bit. Let's say, I'll tell you what let's do. Let's go ahead. This is actually just this is a copy, so I'm going to delete all masks on this. This is the global edit that I did. So we're going to select background, and let's brighten the background just a little bit. And it was on a gray, stormy gray background. Because I have altered the white balance in this, it has gone a little bit blue. And I did actually really like that and kind of went forward with that in a lot of the different edits. But let's say we want to bring some of that purple out. See where that is kind of going purple? You can go here to this red on the tone curve. Again, a new addition in Lightroom. And we can take some of that red out, and it replaces the red with cyan. So we've gone with a bluer look here. So that kind of cools it quite a bit. Now another thing that we can do is we can do this hue adjustment, which is specific to the masks. And we can change what that hue is and just see if there's a different color background that we might like for this. Now, when you start doing things like this, you will realize pretty quickly that there are some edge issues. And we covered last week how to deal with blending the feathering part by doing select background and then subtract background, and that's going to give you just this in-between spot. And then you can kind of blend that in a little bit better. Another way that you can do this is, let's try subtract, select subject. Let's see what happens with that, because that's the inverse, and it does help it, but you can go in with a brush and blend it. But for the purposes of what we're doing here today, we're not going to go in and fine tune that just yet. I just want to show you what we can do within the mask. Now, if you don't like the hue adjustment, there's another way of adjusting the color. Again, this is something specific to local adjustments, and that's this little letter box down here beside color, and it's down here in the color box. When you click this, we get this, which is all about hue and saturation. As you go left to right, that is the hue. Bottom to top is no saturation to highly saturated. And there's a box that we can kind of move around it. I'm just left clicking and dragging, and you can play with this and you can kind of see what you want as far as the color. And with that kind of pinkish dress, I really like how the blues are looking, but that might be a little too saturated. So I bring it down, reducing the saturation. And now we have that. And we have two swatches up here. This one to the right is the current color, and it shows that hue of blue. To the left is the original color. If you decide you don't like it, click that box to the left, and that brings it back to the original color. Now over here you also have 5 different boxes, and you can change based on one click. That is a really heavy warming tone. That's a more subtle warming tone, even more subtle, and then we start getting into the cooling tones. And if you find one that you kind of like this one, but it's a little too saturated, this box right here, that is where we're getting that color tone. If you'll look, when I move this, it's showing where it is on that grid. And by bringing it down just a little bit, left click and drag, I can reduce that saturation. So let's just say I like it here. Click the X here. This box is now active. That shows that you do have a color change going on there. We can do more with the color here with the temperature slider. Warm it just ever so slightly, just to take some of that intensity out, since the dress is kind of a light pink. But you see how much control we have, and I do like backgrounds for people portraits just because of being able to do this so easily. And one click, select background, go in and do this, and again I can drop the texture, I can drop the clarity. It doesn't make it blurred, it doesn't give it that faux narrow depth of field, but what it will do is it will take some of the emphasis out of this texture. And I want it a little bit. I do like this texture here. It gives it just a little bit more interest, but I didn't want it as sharp as it started out. And I just clicked the eyeball. We went back to the before. Here's the after. And you'll notice as we do more subtle changes, this feather here on her arm is not as noticeable. But remember, we also did the background and then we subtracted the subject. If we take away the subtract subject, not really a big change there. It just gives it a little bit more definition right here at this line. So keep that in mind when you're working with these things, because you don't want to have weird colors going on right here. And always go in, zoom in 100%, and you can check the edges and see what's going on. We can look down here at the hair. Again, we didn't take the mask away from the hair, but what we didn't really affect it. If she was blonde, that would definitely have been affected. We would have had to do something. But with the dark hair, the little bit of bleed over from the background is not really causing any problems. So keep that kind of thing in mind when you're working with backgrounds. And again, just like we did with the select subject, if we do select background, it does that. Go up here to the top of the stack, click invert, and there's another way to select subject. So the invert works on all these masks, and you can see over here on the masking dialog box what is in white is being affected. So we know this is the subject, we know this is the background. Of course, I always advocate entering in what these are, especially if you have multiple subjects or multiple background. You can do one and do background clarity, background color change. It makes it easier to change your mind and see what individual things are doing. If you do a whole lot of things on one edit in one mask, like we did with mask 1, remember all the different things that we've got included here. Well, I changed it up after we started, but we had multiple sliders that were activated. And if we wanted to see what it looked like without a portion of that, we would have had to go in and either hit eyeballs on several different boxes or gone and zeroed these sliders out. It's a whole lot easier to have a background clarity, a background color, maybe background vignette or something like that. That will help keep everything nice and straight. And then you just go through and you hit one eyeball and it lets you know what that specific mask has done. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you on the background mask, and I hope it has been beneficial. And let's see, let's go back here. So just know that the background mask has limited use unless you're photographing people. If you're photographing people, I find it very, very useful. If you are a landscape photographer, not so much. Wildlife, I can imagine it would still be a little on the difficult side, but give it a try. I don't do wildlife, so I don't have anything really to try with it. It would probably be helpful, but I have a feeling that doing select subject, doing some brushing would establish that a little bit better. So just know that it is there, and know what kind of adjustments you can do within these masks, things that are not available through the global edits. And we talked about the different color choices, the fact that we can now do point color, which is really helpful, the tone curve along with the color tone curves. Those are wonderful additions, and the more you use these local adjustments, the more you're going to be able to use these and make them work for you. A lot of the color ones I've found very beneficial when dealing with sky, not necessarily as the select sky mask, but in with a linear gradient, and we're going to talk about that in some detail later on. In fact, we'll be getting into linear gradient here fairly soon, next couple weeks probably. That's one of my most used masks. That and the radial are my favorites. But we'll be back next week with another Tuesday's Tips. And don't forget, if you're having some difficulties with editing and want some help, I do offer mentorships. I can do it virtually. I can do it in person if you're local to the foothills of North Carolina. I'll leave links down in the description with that. Also a link to Michelle's Instagram. Again, highly recommend working with her if you're in the need for a model in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. She does travel, but get in touch with her. And other than that, happy shooting, happy editing, and I'll see you back here next week.